At 2:20 a.m. on November 28, 1950, Private First Class Hector Cafferata stood barefoot in the frozen snow outside his foxhole on a hillside in North Korea, wearing nothing but his utility trousers and an undershirt, watching 2,500 Chinese soldiers pour down the mountain toward his position. 21 years old, 6 feet 3 inches tall, 235 pounds of New Jersey farm boy who had joined the Marines 11 months earlier. The temperature was 30 degrees below zero. His boots sat inside the foxhole where he had taken them off 90 minutes ago to let his feet dry. His M1 rifle lay beside them. In his hands, he held an entrenching tool, a small folding shovel designed for digging foxholes. The Chinese soldiers were 50 yards away and closing fast. Behind Cafferata, Fox Company's 240 men occupied a defensive perimeter on a hillside the Marines called Fox Hill. Below them, the village of Udamni held 2 Marine regiments, 8,000 men who represented the furthest advance of United Nations forces into North Korea. The plan had been simple. Drive to the Yalu River, end the war by Christmas, go home. Then, 120,000 Chinese soldiers crossed the border and surrounded the Marines. Fox Company's mission was to hold the road. Without that road, the 8,000 Marines at Udamni could not retreat. Without a retreat route, they would all die on that frozen hillside. And at 2:20 a.m., the Chinese had decided Fox Company would not hold anything. The attack came from 3 directions simultaneously. Bugles blared across the frozen valley. Whistles shrieked. Voices shouted in Chinese. Then the mortars started falling. Cafferata heard the first rounds hit the company command post 100 yards behind his position. He heard men screaming. He heard corpsmen shouting for stretcher-bearers. He heard Lieutenant McCarthy on the radio calling for artillery support that would not arrive for another 40 minutes. Then he heard something closer. Footsteps in the snow. Many footsteps. Running toward his foxhole. Cafferata's fighting hole sat on the left flank of Fox Company's perimeter. He shared it with Private Kenneth Benson, another replacement who had joined the company in September. Neither man had seen combat before tonight. They had spent the past 3 days digging this hole, chipping through frozen earth with entrenching tools, building it deep enough to protect them from mortar fragments and small arms fire. Inside the hole, their gear was organized with military precision. Rifles, ammunition, grenades, rations, medical supplies, everything a Marine needed to survive in combat. Except warmth. There was no defense against the cold. It crept through their clothing, through their boots, through their gloves. It turned fingers numb and made rifle bolts stick. Cafferata had taken his boots off to dry his feet, trying to prevent frostbite. Benson had done the same. Both men sat in their socks when the attack began. Now Chinese soldiers were 30 yards away, and Cafferata was standing in the snow wearing socks that had already frozen to his feet. If you want to see how a barefoot Marine with a shovel survived the next 15 hours, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories like this. And subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Cafferata. The first Chinese soldier appeared at the lip of the foxhole. Cafferata saw the man's face, saw the quilted winter uniform, saw the Russian-made PPSH submachine gun coming up to fire. Cafferata swung the entrenching tool. The steel blade caught the Chinese soldier in the neck. The man went down. Another soldier appeared. Cafferata swung again. The entrenching tool was never designed as a weapon. It was a tool. A piece of equipment that weighed 2.5 pounds, measured 23 inches when extended, featured a 6-inch steel blade that could be locked at a 90-degree angle for digging. But in Cafferata's hands, it became something else. The second Chinese soldier fell. The third tried to jump into the foxhole. Cafferata caught him mid-air, drove the shovel blade into the man's chest, threw the body aside. Benson was firing his M1 rifle from inside the hole. The rifle cracked 8 times, then the bolt locked back. Empty. Benson grabbed another clip, reloaded, kept firing. More Chinese soldiers appeared. They came in waves, running up the hillside, trying to overwhelm the position through sheer numbers. Cafferata fought them off with the entrenching tool. He was still standing outside the foxhole, still barefoot, still wearing nothing but trousers and an undershirt in 30 below zero weather. The cold did not register. The adrenaline would not let it. His body was operating on survival instinct and training. The training came from Paris Island. 7 months earlier, Hector Cafferata had stepped off a bus at the Marine Corps recruit depot in South Carolina, one of 75 young men who would spend the next 12 weeks learning to become Marines. The drill instructors broke them down first, stripped away their civilian identities, their comfort, their individuality, taught them to think like Marines, to move like Marines, to fight like Marines. Cafferata excelled at everything physical. The obstacle course, the forced marches, the bayonet training. At 6'3" and 235 pounds, he was larger than most recruits. The drill instructors used him as an example during hand-to-hand combat training. But Cafferata's real skill was something else. He could shoot. The Marine Corps qualification course required recruits to hit targets at 200, 300 and 500 yards, standing, kneeling, prone, slow fire and rapid fire. Cafferata shot expert on his first attempt, 220 out of 250 possible points. The rifle range instructor pulled him aside afterward, asked if he had grown up hunting. Cafferata explained he was from New Jersey. His family ran a small farm in Boonton. He had been shooting since he was 8 years old. Rabbits, squirrels, deer. His father had taught him that wasted ammunition meant wasted money. Every shot had to count. The instructor nodded. That mindset would serve him well in combat. At the time, Cafferata did not know there would be combat. This was March 1950. The war in Korea would not start for another 3 months. After boot camp, Cafferata received orders to the 2nd Marine Division at Camp Lejeune. He spent the summer training for amphibious operations. The Marines were practicing beach assaults, small unit tactics, night movements. In August, North Korea invaded South Korea. By September, the Marines were boarding ships for the Pacific. Cafferata sailed from San Diego on September 17th aboard the USS General W.H. Gordon. The transport carried 5,000 troops packed into every available space. The voyage took 2 weeks. Men slept in bunks stacked 4 high. The air below deck was hot and thick. Cafferata spent most of the crossing on deck, watching the ocean, wondering what combat would actually be like. The ship arrived at Incheon on October 3rd. The landing had already happened 2 weeks earlier. General MacArthur's amphibious assault on September 15th had turned the war around. The North Korean army was retreating. The Marines were advancing. By October 15th, Cafferata's unit had reached the 38th parallel. By October 26th, they had crossed into North Korea. The advance continued through early November. Intelligence reports said the North Korean army was finished. The war would be over by Thanksgiving. Then the Chinese entered the war. The first reports came on November 1st. Chinese soldiers had been spotted near the Yalu River. Initial estimates said maybe 30,000 troops. Then 60,000. Then 100,000. By November 27th, the actual number was closer to 300,000. Fox Company received orders to establish a defensive position on a hillside 5 miles south of Udamni. The position controlled the road. If the Marines at Udamni needed to retreat, they would use this road. Fox Company's job was to keep it open. The company dug in on November 27th. 240 men arranged in a horseshoe-shaped perimeter. Machine gun positions on both flanks. Mortars in the center. Foxholes every 20 yards. Cafferata and Benson dug their hole on the left flank. They worked for 3 hours, chipping through frozen ground, piling the dirt around the hole's rim to create a parapet. By nightfall, they had a position 4 feet deep and 6 feet wide. Good enough to survive in, not good enough to be comfortable in. The temperature dropped after sunset. The company thermometer registered -20 at 8 p.m. By midnight, it was -30. Cafferata tried to sleep but could not. His feet were wet. His boots were damp from the day's march. He took them off to let them dry. Benson did the same. Both men sat in the foxhole wearing wool socks and trying to ignore the cold. At 2:20 a.m., the bugles started. Now, standing barefoot in the snow, Cafferata was fighting for his life with an entrenching tool. He had killed 3 Chinese soldiers in the first 30 seconds. 5 more came at him. He swung the shovel, connected with the first man, dropped him. The second man fired his burp gun. The rounds went wide. Cafferata stepped forward, drove the shovel blade into the man's face. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th soldiers tried to rush him simultaneously. Cafarata swept the shovel horizontally. The blade caught 2 of them. The 3rd man got inside Cafarata's reach, tried to tackle him. Cafarata dropped the shovel, grabbed the Chinese soldier by the throat, lifted him off the ground, threw him down the hillside. The man tumbled 20 feet before stopping. Benson was still firing from the foxhole. His M1 had jammed. The bolt was frozen. He was working it manually, trying to clear the malfunction while Chinese soldiers kept coming. Cafarata picked up his entrenching tool and resumed fighting. More soldiers appeared. They came in groups of 3 or 4, trying to flank the position, trying to get behind Cafarata. He moved constantly, shifting left and right, using the foxhole's parapet for cover, swinging the shovel at anything that moved. His feet had gone completely numb. The frozen socks had bonded to his skin. Ice crystals formed on his bare arms. His breath came out in white clouds. The Chinese soldiers kept coming. Cafarata lost count after 15. They appeared out of the darkness, running uphill, firing their weapons, throwing grenades. The grenades were the worst. Cafarata saw one land near the foxhole. He dove for it, grabbed it, threw it back. The grenade exploded in midair, 10 yards away. Fragments peppered his right arm. He did not feel them. Another grenade landed inside the foxhole. Benson saw it, shouted a warning. Cafarata jumped into the hole, grabbed the grenade, threw it out. The explosion came before the grenade cleared the parapet. The blast caught Cafarata in the chest and face. He felt the impact, felt something hot punch into his left eye. Then pain, intense, blinding pain. Cafarata put his hand to his face. His fingers came away bloody. His left eye was not working. Vision was gone on that side. He could not tell if the eye was still there or if the fragments had torn it out. Benson pulled him deeper into the foxhole, asked if he was okay. Cafarata said he could still fight. The attack continued. Chinese soldiers appeared at the foxhole rim. Cafarata was partially blind now, his left eye destroyed, blood running down his face. He grabbed his M1 rifle. The weapon had been sitting in the foxhole for an hour. The metal was frozen, the bolt would not move. Cafarata slammed the rifle against the foxhole wall. The impact jarred the bolt free. He chambered around, brought the rifle up, fired. A Chinese soldier dropped. Cafarata worked the bolt, chambered another round, fired again. The M1 held 8 rounds. He emptied the clip in 8 seconds. 8 shots, 8 Chinese soldiers down. He reloaded, kept firing. Benson had fixed his rifle's malfunction. Both Marines were firing now. The Chinese attack at their position faltered. Bodies were piling up around the foxhole. The snow was red with blood. The smell of gunpowder and copper filled the air. Then the bugles sounded again. A second wave was coming. Cafarata checked his ammunition. He had 2 clips left, 16 rounds. Benson had 3 clips, 24 rounds. Not enough for another sustained attack. Cafarata looked around the foxhole, saw fallen weapons, Chinese burp guns, Russian PPH submachine guns. He grabbed one, checked the magazine. Full. 71 rounds. He handed it to Benson, grabbed another for himself. The second wave hit at 2:45 a.m. More Chinese soldiers running uphill, firing as they came, trying to overwhelm the position through sheer mass. Cafarata and Benson opened fire with the captured weapons. The burp guns fired at 900 rounds per minute. Fully automatic. The sound was distinctive, a rapid popping that gave the weapon its nickname. The Chinese soldiers were 20 yards away when Cafarata started firing. The 7.62mm rounds tore through their quilted uniforms. Men went down in groups. The burp gun's 71-round drum magazine gave Cafarata sustained fire that his M1 could not match. He swept the weapon left and right, cutting down soldiers as they appeared. The magazine emptied in 8 seconds. Cafarata grabbed another burp gun, kept firing. Benson was doing the same. The 2 Marines created a wall of fire that stopped the second wave 15 yards from their position. The Chinese soldiers took cover behind rocks and dead bodies. They were still coming, but slower now, more cautiously. They had learned that charging the foxhole meant death. Cafarata used the lull to assess his situation. His left eye was destroyed. Blood had frozen on his face. His feet were completely numb, probably frostbitten. His hands were shaking from cold and adrenaline. His chest hurt where the grenade fragments had hit him. But he was alive. The foxhole was holding. The sun would not rise for another 4 hours. 4 hours of darkness. 4 hours of fighting. Kafurata did not know if he could survive that long. At 3:15 a.m., the Chinese changed tactics. Instead of direct assault, they began flanking maneuvers. Small groups moved along the hillside, trying to get around Fox Company's perimeter, trying to find weak points. Kafurata saw them moving, shadows in the darkness, shifting positions, working their way closer. He could not leave his foxhole to intercept them. If he moved, the Chinese would rush his position. He had to stay and fight from this one spot. He watched the flanking groups move closer to the company command post. If they reached it, they would kill Lieutenant McCarthy and the company staff. Fox Company would lose command and control. The defensive perimeter would collapse. Kafurata made a decision. He grabbed a captured burp gun aimed at the nearest Chinese squad, opened fire. The range was 60 yards, too far for accurate shooting in darkness. But the tracer rounds showed him where the bullets were going. He adjusted his aim, walked the fire into the target. The Chinese squad scattered. 2 men went down, the rest retreated into the darkness. Another squad appeared on the right side. Kafurata shifted his fire, engaged them. Same result. They scattered. The flanking maneuver stopped. The Chinese commanders had learned that Kafurata could see them moving, that he would engage at long range, that trying to bypass his position meant dying. So they changed tactics again. At 3:45 a.m., the Chinese brought up heavy weapons. Machine guns, mortars, recoilless rifles. They positioned them 200 yards away and began pounding Fox Company's perimeter. Kafurata and Benson ducked into their foxhole as rounds impacted around them. The frozen ground absorbed most of the explosive force, but fragments still flew through the air. The machine gun fire was sustained, long bursts that tore through the company's positions. Kafurata heard Marines screaming in other foxholes, heard corpsmen calling for stretcher bearers. Heard officers trying to maintain order over the radio. The barrage lasted 20 minutes. When it stopped, the Chinese infantry attacked again. This time they came in battalion strength. Over 500 soldiers rushing up the hillside, trying to overwhelm Fox Company through sheer numbers. Kafurata stood up in his foxhole and started shooting. He had gathered every weapon within reach. His M1 rifle, Benson's M1, 4 captured burp guns, 3 stick grenades. He fired the M1 until it ran dry, dropped it, grabbed a burp gun, fired until it ran dry, dropped it, grabbed another weapon. Benson was doing the same. The 2 Marines created so much fire that the Chinese attack stalled 25 yards from their position. Bodies piled up in the snow. The Chinese soldiers were using their dead comrades for cover, crawling forward, trying to reach the foxhole. Kafurata threw grenades. The stick grenades had longer range than American models. He could throw them 40 yards. Each explosion cleared a space in the approaching mass of soldiers, but more kept coming. The Chinese had committed to taking this position. They would spend as many lives as necessary. Kafurata ran out of ammunition at 4:10 a.m. Every weapon was empty, every grenade thrown. He looked at Benson. Benson was out too. The Chinese soldiers were 15 yards away and closing. Kafurata grabbed his entrenching tool. If he was going to die, he would die fighting. But before the Chinese could reach the foxhole, something happened. Artillery fire began landing on the hillside. American 105mm howitzers from the battery at Udam-ni. The shells walked across the Chinese formation, exploding among the attacking soldiers, throwing bodies into the air. The Chinese attack broke. Soldiers retreated down the hillside, carrying their wounded, leaving their dead behind. The artillery fire continued for 10 minutes, saturating the area where the Chinese had massed. By 4:20 a.m., the attack was over. The hillside fell silent. Kafurata sat down in his foxhole. His body was shaking, not from fear, from cold. The adrenaline was wearing off. The temperature was still 30 below zero. He had been standing barefoot in the snow for 2 hours, fighting in an undershirt. The cold was finally catching up with him. Benson tried to give him a jacket. Kafurata refused. He said if he put the jacket on, he would not be able to move his arms. The jacket was frozen stiff. Better to stay cold and mobile than warm and immobilized. Lieutenant McCarthy appeared at their foxhole at 4:35 a.m. He had crawled across the perimeter to check on his men. When he reached Kafurata's position, he stopped and stared. The area around the foxhole looked like a slaughterhouse, bodies everywhere, blood frozen in the snow, spent shell casings littering the ground. McCarthy asked how many Chinese soldiers Kaffarata had killed. Kaffarata said he did not know. He had stopped counting after 20. McCarthy said he was recommending both men for Silver Stars. Kaffarata said they did not need medals, they needed ammunition. McCarthy promised to send ammunition as soon as the supply situation stabilized. Then he moved on to check the rest of the perimeter. The Chinese attacked again at 5:10 a.m., this time from a different direction. They had probed Fox Company's defenses, found the weak points, and were now exploiting them. Kaffarata could see the attack developing 100 yards to his right. A large Chinese force was hitting the company's right flank, trying to roll up the defensive line. If they succeeded, they would cut Fox Company in half. Kaffarata grabbed his M1 rifle. A Marine from another position had brought him ammunition during the lull. 8 clips, 64 rounds. Kaffarata loaded the rifle, stood up, started engaging the Chinese force attacking the right flank. The range was 80 yards, long range for an M1 in darkness. But Kaffarata had grown up shooting rifles. He knew how to lead moving targets, how to compensate for wind, how to read terrain. He began shooting Chinese soldiers who were trying to flank Fox Company's right side. Each shot was aimed. Each shot counted. The M1 rifle held 8 rounds. Kaffarata fired 8 times. 8 Chinese soldiers went down. He reloaded, fired 8 more times. 8 more soldiers down. The Chinese force on the right flank began taking casualties they could not explain. Men were falling 80 yards from the nearest Marine position. The Chinese commanders did not realize that one Marine, standing alone on the left flank, was shooting their soldiers from across the perimeter. Kaffarata continued firing. He went through 6 clips in 15 minutes, 48 rounds. 48 Chinese soldiers dead or wounded. The attack on the right flank stalled. The Chinese soldiers went to ground, confused by the heavy fire coming from an unexpected direction. By 5:30 a.m., the attack was over. Fox Company still held its perimeter. Dawn came at 6:15 a.m. The first light revealed the devastation around Kaffarata's foxhole. He counted 76 Chinese bodies within 30 yards of his position. More bodies lay scattered down the hillside. The snow was red with blood for 50 yards in every direction. Benson had been wounded during the 5:10 attack. A bullet had grazed his shoulder. The wound was not serious, but he was losing blood. Kaffarata wrapped the wound with a field dressing, told Benson to stay in the foxhole. He would handle the next attack alone if necessary. The next attack came at 7 a.m. Daylight made the Chinese tactics more visible. They approached in squad-sized elements, using terrain for cover, moving from rock to rock. Kaffarata engaged them with his M1 rifle. Each target was clearly visible now. No more shooting at shadows. The Chinese soldiers took heavy casualties. They pulled back after 20 minutes. At 8 a.m., a corpsman reached Kaffarata's position. The corpsman looked at Kaffarata's face, saw the destroyed left eye, the frozen blood, the grenade fragments embedded in his chest and arms. He tried to evacuate Kaffarata to the aid station. Kaffarata refused. He said he could still see out of his right eye. He could still shoot. The position needed to be held. The corpsman argued. Kaffarata said the conversation was over. The corpsman gave him morphine for the pain, wrapped his face wound and moved on to other casualties. The morphine did not help much. The cold had numbed most of Kaffarata's body. Adding medication to that mix created a strange disconnection. He could see what was happening, could respond to it, but felt detached from the experience. At 9:30 a.m., Fox Company's situation became critical. The Chinese had surrounded the entire perimeter. They controlled the high ground on 3 sides. They were bringing up more heavy weapons. Fox Company was running low on ammunition, low on medical supplies, and had suffered 20% casualties. Lieutenant McCarthy called for air support. The request went up the chain to regimental headquarters. At 10:15 a.m., Marine Corsairs appeared over Fox Hill. The F-4U fighters dove on the Chinese positions, dropping napalm and 500-pound bombs. The napalm canisters tumbled through the air, struck the hillside, exploded in rolling orange fireballs. The temperature on the ground jumped 200 degrees in seconds. Chinese soldiers caught in the napalm died instantly. Others ran, burning. The Corsairs made 4 passes, dropping ordnance each time. By 10:45 a.m., the Chinese positions were devastated. The air support broke the back of the Chinese attack. The soldiers who survived pulled back to regroup. Fox Company used the lull to redistribute ammunition, evacuate wounded, and reinforce their foxholes. Cafferata received 12 more clips for his M1, 96 rounds. A Marine from the company armory brought him a Thompson submachine gun with 6 magazines. The Thompson held 30 rounds per magazine, 180 additional rounds. Cafferata now had ammunition for sustained fire. At 11:30 a.m., the Chinese tried again. This time they attacked from the valley floor, advancing uphill in company strength, over 200 soldiers moving in coordinated waves. Cafferata engaged them at 150 yards. The Thompson submachine gun's effective range was 100 yards, but Cafferata fired it in short bursts, conserving ammunition, making each burst count. The Chinese advance slowed under the concentrated fire from Fox Company's perimeter. The Marines were holding but barely. Casualties were mounting. Ammunition was running low again. Medical supplies were exhausted. The company corpsman was using torn clothing as bandages. At 12:15 p.m., Lieutenant McCarthy made a decision. He called for a helicopter evacuation of the most seriously wounded. The request was approved. At 1 p.m., an HO-3S helicopter appeared over Fox Hill. The small helicopter could carry only 2 wounded at a time. The corpsman selected the worst cases. Cafferata was on the list. He refused to board. He told Lieutenant McCarthy that he could still fight. Other Marines needed that helicopter more than he did. McCarthy ordered him to board. Cafferata said no. McCarthy threatened him with a court-martial. Cafferata said he would take the court-martial after the battle. Right now, the position needed every Marine who could hold a rifle. McCarthy stared at him for a long moment. Then he moved on to other decisions. The battle continued through the afternoon. The Chinese launched 3 more attacks. Each attack was repulsed with heavy casualties on both sides. By 4 p.m., Fox Company had been fighting for 14 hours. The company had started with 240 men. Casualties had reduced that number to 158 effectives, nearly 35% losses, but the position still held. At 4:30 p.m., as daylight began fading, Cafferata finally collapsed. His body simply stopped working. The cold, the wounds, the exhaustion, the blood loss, everything caught up with him at once. He fell forward in his foxhole. Benson grabbed him, kept him from falling out onto the snow. The corpsman came running. This time, Cafferata could not refuse evacuation. He was unconscious. They carried him to the aid station on a stretcher. The medical officer examined him and immediately called for another helicopter. Cafferata's condition was critical. Severe frostbite to both feet, multiple grenade fragment wounds to his face, chest and arms, his left eye destroyed, extensive blood loss, hypothermia. If he did not receive advanced medical treatment within hours, he would die. The helicopter arrived at 5:15 p.m. They loaded Cafferata aboard with 3 other wounded Marines. The helicopter lifted off just as another Chinese attack began. Cafferata had held his position for 15 hours. 15 hours of continuous combat in 30 below zero weather. 15 hours barefoot in the snow. 15 hours fighting an enemy force that outnumbered Fox Company by more than 10 to 1. The helicopter carried him to the hospital ship USS Consolation, anchored off the coast. Surgeons operated immediately. They removed grenade fragments from his chest, face and arms. They removed what remained of his left eye. They treated the frostbite damage to his feet. Both feet required partial amputation. Several toes on each foot were gone, frozen beyond recovery. The surgeon said he was lucky. If he had stayed on Fox Hill another hour, he would have lost both feet entirely. Cafferata woke up 3 days later in a hospital bed. A Navy nurse was checking his vital signs. He asked what had happened to Fox Company. The nurse said Fox Company had held Fox Hill. The Chinese never took the position. The road to Udamni remained open. The 8,000 Marines trapped at Udamni had successfully retreated through Fox Company's position. The breakout from the Chosin Reservoir was being called one of the greatest fighting withdrawals in Marine Corps history, and it had only been possible because Fox Company held that hillside for 5 days against overwhelming odds. Cafferata asked about casualties. The nurse said Fox Company had lost 82 men killed or wounded out of 240, over 30% casualties. But the position held. The Chinese had committed nearly 5,000 soldiers to taking Fox Hill over 5 days. They failed. Cafferata asked about his feet. The nurse told him the truth. He would walk again, but not like before. The frostbite damage was permanent. His Marine Corps career was over. Cafferata was evacuated to Japan, then to the United States. He spent 8 months in military hospitals undergoing rehabilitation, learning to walk on damaged feet, adjusting to life with one eye, processing the memories of that night on Fox Hill. The Marine Corps recommended him for the Medal of Honor in January 1951. The recommendation included testimony from Lieutenant McCarthy, from Benson, from every Marine who had witnessed what Cafferata did that night. The citations described him as standing barefoot in the snow for hours, fighting off hundreds of Chinese soldiers with an entrenching tool, throwing back grenades, refusing evacuation despite severe wounds, and continuing to fight until he physically collapsed. The Medal of Honor was approved in August 1951. President Harry Truman presented it to Cafferata in a White House ceremony on November 24, 1952. Cafferata, many had tears in their eyes. Cafferata was confused. He did not understand why they were applauding. He said he had just done his job. That was what Marines did. They held the line. The Korean War Veterans Association made Cafferata their national spokesperson in 1985. He traveled the country, speaking at schools and veterans events. He advocated for Korean War recognition. The conflict had been called the Forgotten War, because it fell between World War II and Vietnam in the public consciousness. Cafferata worked to change that. He reminded people that 36,000 Americans died in Korea, that those deaths meant something, that the soldiers who fought there deserved to be remembered. In 2000, Cafferata returned to Korea for the first time since 1950. The South Korean government had invited Korean War veterans to visit the country to see what their sacrifice had achieved. Cafferata walked the streets of Seoul, a city that had been devastated by war 50 years earlier. Now it was modern, prosperous, peaceful. South Korea had become an economic powerhouse, a thriving democracy. The transformation had only been possible because Marines like Cafferata held positions like Fox Hill. During the trip, Cafferata visited Fox Hill. The Korean government had turned it into a memorial. Plaques listed the names of every Marine who fought there. A statue depicted a Marine in winter combat gear. The hillside looked different now. Trees had grown, the scars of battle had faded, but Cafferata could still see it as it was, could still see the Chinese soldiers coming uphill, could still feel the cold, could still hear the bugles and the screams and the gunfire. A Korean veteran approached him. The man was Cafferata's age, had fought in the Korean army during the war. Through a translator, he thanked Cafferata for what he had done, said that Korea remembered, said that freedom had a price, and men like Cafferata had paid it. Cafferata did not know what to say. He nodded, shook the man's hand, walked away. Later that night, alone in his hotel room, he cried. It was the first time he had cried about Fox Hill since 1950. Hector Cafferata died on April 12th, 2016. He was 86 years old. The cause was complications from congestive heart failure. He was buried with full military honours at Arlington National Cemetery. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, Marines in dress blues, Korean War veterans, family members, representatives from the South Korean government. During the ceremony, a Marine Corps rifle team fired 3 volleys, a bugler played taps. The flag that draped his coffin was folded and presented to his widow. Then something unexpected happened. A group of Korean students who had travelled from Seoul approached the grave. They were teenagers, born decades after the war. They laid flowers on the coffin and bowed in respect. One student, speaking in English, said they had learned about Fox Hill in school. They knew what Cafferata had done. They wanted him to know that Korea had not forgotten. The Medal of Honor citation lists 15 enemy killed. The official Marine Corps records estimate 30 to 50, but the real number was probably higher. Cafferata fought for 15 hours. He used rifles, submachine guns, burp guns, grenades, and an entrenching tool. He stood barefoot in 30 below zero weather and refused to retreat. He threw back grenades even after being wounded. He kept fighting until his body physically gave out. Decades after the battle, historians analyzed Chinese military records captured during the Korean War. One report from the commander of the Chinese regiment that attacked Fox Hill described casualties from the November 28th assault as catastrophic and unexpected. The commander noted that a single defensive position on the American left flank had inflicted severe losses on multiple attacking companies. That position was Cafarata's foxhole. The Chinese regiment had started the attack with 2,500 men. After 5 days of fighting, fewer than 1,000 remained combat effective. A significant portion of those casualties came from one Marine standing barefoot in the snow with a shovel and a rifle. If this story moved you the way it moved us, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. Stories about Marines who held impossible positions against impossible odds. Real people. Real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, or South Korea? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served in Korea. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching. And thank you for making sure Hector Cafarata doesn't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.